It's Free Talk Live. Dial toll-free. Bring up whatever you want to discuss. Our toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE, like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We've also got the Discord on-air call-in line rooms. Just jump on over into our Discord server over at discord.lrn.fm. And you can join one of those top 4 rooms there, and when we see you, we'll join you in, and you'll sound almost like you're sitting in the studio with us as we play a little bit of musical hosts here. Listeners on the radio don't know this, but Aria DiMezzo joining me and Melanie tonight. Hello, Melanie.
Hey.
And Aria.
Hello.
Welcome back. You are doing double. Both of y'all are actually doing double duty tonight because you just got off of 3 hours on the air with Call to Freedom, which is your Aria's daily show that you do on LRN.FM.
Correct.
So now you're going for another 3 hours on a lot of broadcast radio stations where we can talk to a bit of a larger audience. Although, you know, the participation level is about the same on weeknights as far as, you know, the amount of calls you guys get on Call to Freedom and Free Talk Live. It's like some nights on the weeknights, it's Sarah. And that's it. Isn't it amazing? Like that we're on all those radio stations, like that I know we're actually on. It's not like some sort of BS number because I call the radio stations personally and talk to the program directors. And, you know, if one of them drops off or changes format, usually I'll find out about it within 3 to 6 months of that happening. And so I update the website. And I was commenting the other day, the funny thing about this show is we were the most wall-to-wall with callers when we were on one station in Sarasota, Florida, back in 2002 and 2003. We had more callers every single night than we currently do as a syndicated show on 190 radio stations.
That's interesting.
There's no explanation for it. I mean,
it kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd's The Wall, really, because the entire point behind The Wall was that as you grow larger, you become more and more disconnected from your audience.
But that's not the intention of the show, right?
Absolutely.
Like the intention is to have an open phones show. And it's not to say that we do a bad show without calls. There's like this mythology in talk radio amongst especially newer talk show hosts, which is, well, if you don't have calls, then that means you're doing a bad show. No, that's not true at all. You could be doing a great show with no calls. In fact, some calls make a show worse because they're just that bad. But the measurement that you should be using is, in my opinion, your satisfaction with what you're doing on the air, the individual, the host satisfaction, rather than some sort of metric of, oh, we only got this many calls. I'm only talking about it to point out the fact that maybe the confusion with the listener is they think, oh, well, this is a national show, so I'm never going to get through, right? Like, you know, if you think about it, if you try calling Rush Limbaugh's show, I'm betting you the lines are going to be busy. And he almost never takes phone calls. But I suspect he's got people sitting on hold waiting for hours at a time before he might actually get to a call.
They may also be intimidated.
Yeah, that could be. That could be. I mean, you're never going to get probably more than 1% of your listening audience to ever pick up a phone. There's no doubt about that. The kind of person who is going to call into the talk radio shows, it does take a special kind of person, somebody who really has something that they want to be heard. But it's just amazing that after 15 plus years of doing this and 190 like confirmed broadcast licensed radio stations, that we can literally go through a 3-hour long show. Now, to be fair, not all 190 stations are on at once, but dozens of them are, and only have Sarah be the one caller. It's like nobody. It's not that people don't listen to the radio either, because they do, right? People listen all over the place to the radio, even though we have MP3s and we have, CDs and we've got satellite and we've got all these other options. Broadcast radio still has incredible, like, plus 90% penetration into Americans' lives. So it's not that the listeners aren't there. It's just that for whatever reason, only Sarah has figured out that she can get access to a national radio platform relatively easily. So with that in mind, our toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE. And, sometimes I wonder, like, could we go Discord only? Because for those that are new to the show here, we are on a platform, we've got a chat room, basically. It's a chat server with multiple rooms where our listeners can go to discord.lrn.fm and they can chat with each other. And frequently the hosts are in there. I'm in there basically all day long. not watching it all day, but I'm logged in. And there's these call-in lines there that just sound so much better than traditional phone calls. It's like sometimes I'm tempted, man, I would just love to do Discord only and just have all good like if we're going to have very few calls, just have very few good quality, like listenable calls. Because sometimes calls on the radio are just god-awful. Not the content, like that the person might be saying something really interesting, but you can't hear them because there's like construction in the background, or they're just the phone's too loud, so it's blowing out its it's distorting, and it just sounds absolutely awful.
Yeah.
So that's something that I debate with. It's like, well, but then I know that on like a Saturday night when we have more of our bigger stations on, we wouldn't get as much participation because most people probably don't want to. Like if it's hard to get somebody to call the radio, then it's probably even harder to get them to install an app first, before they do it. So anyway, just thought I'd share.
That's unfortunate. Discord is awesome.
It really
regardless
is.
of the purpose.
It is a great platform. In fact, there was an interesting article, and I don't have it in show prep. I just thought it was, I don't know, I guess I felt like it probably would be better for Freer Talk Live, but it was all about how Discord is being targeted by law enforcement, and that there's apparently some hackers that have their own Discord servers. And like people who do nasty things, like, because hackers can do some good things, like, white hat hackers or whatever. They also have, like, crackers have their own Discord servers. Crackers being people who, crack security systems and things like that, or steal credit card numbers or whatever. Because anybody can just go and create a Discord server. It's a centrally managed platform, but anybody who has an internet, access can just go and make one up, just spin up a Discord and then call it whatever you want, set whatever rules for it that you want to, and promote it wherever you want to promote it. So they've been, like the Discord company, whoever they are, is kind of tasked with this hunting job of taking out these naughty servers where people are doing illegal things. And I don't know,
those people should use Telegram.
So Telegram can also take down channels. Now, I don't think they're as known for doing it, but Telegram has been reported as having taken down some terrorism channels in the past.
Huh. Good on them.
Now, I don't know if they do. I don't know if Telegram, has any policy about, let's say, like passing around pirated movies. Like if there was like a pirate channel on Telegram, and I suspect there are many of them. But if they got reported to central whoever at Telegram, would they do something about that?
Well, they would have to if they're located in
they're
the
located
US or
in
most
Russia.
Countries.
In Russia.
Oh, okay.
At least that's my understanding.
Well, it's probably also illegal in Russia, I would imagine.
I don't know.
I don't know.
The guy who runs Telegram, as I understand it, is an anarchist. And that's what Brian Sovereign told me. So that's on hearsay. I've never actually read his opinions or anything, but I do understand that the guy who runs Telegram has also done his best to resist the government's intrusions into his platform. I don't know if you follow anything about that.
I only know the one story about him refusing to give up the encryption keys or something like that.
Now, was that to the Russian
government? Yes.
See, now that's impressive.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to refuse to give up to the governments outside of the borders, right, that are demanding things of you, because then you're just like, well, what are you going to do about it? You're going to make a military incursion into Russia just so you can, so you can arrest me? I mean, that's not going to happen. So it's going up against your own government, the gang that is ruling that particular geographic area. If that's what he did, then that's pretty impressive.
Well, that's what I've heard.
So, speaking of anarchists, people who are against the government, there's actually a news story that I mentioned before it became news. It was breaking at the time a few days ago, maybe several days ago at this point, in Acapulco, which is where Mark Edge, who's one of our regular co-hosts, is right now with his family. And Anarchapulco, of course, is coming up in a couple of weeks, actually less than a couple of weeks, 10 days. Somebody's been shot to death. An actual anarchist has been shot to death, ostensibly by a drug gang. And we'll tell you more about that coming up here. 855-450 Free Like Freedom. That's 855-450-3733. You can join us here. It is Free Talk Live. Hey, it's Free Talk Live. You're invited to take control of the airwaves here. Our number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. And that is a toll-free number. We also have the Discord on-air call-in line rooms. Head on over to discord.lrn.fm and jump into one of those. We'll get you on the air with us here in the studio tonight. It's Ian.
Melanie.
And Aria.
And we're going to tell you about somebody shot to death in Acapulco. Then we've also got a cop who's raped a kid, another cop who's raped another kid, because it's not the first time that story has existed. But, you know, you should trust the police because they're good guys. Bitcoin.com is your premier source for everything Bitcoin related. They can help you choose a Bitcoin wallet, buy Bitcoin, and show you where you can spend your Bitcoin. Bitcoin.com also has the latest news. You can engage with the community on their Bitcoin forum and learn more at Bitcoin.com. You can also take their Bitcoin.com Academy and learn the basics about cryptocurrency. If you haven't done that yet, there's no better time than now to go ahead and do it. Bitcoin.com. Acapulco, the site of the upcoming Anarchapulco event, which will be my third that I've been to. I was there the last 2 years. Mark's been to 3 of them. And it's really a great event. I don't think either of you have been out to it, but
I have not.
If you've been to,
I'm afraid they won't let me back in.
What do you mean?
The U.S.
Oh, I thought you meant you were gonna not be allowed back to Anarchapulco for some reason. Really, is that a legitimate fear in your mind that you think that they're looking for you?
That's probably just paranoid. No, I don't think they're looking. They know exactly where I am right now.
Yeah.
But if they were looking for me, they'd find me. But
that's true. Well, in the case of the border, then you're walking right into their facility, so they don't have to put any real effort into it. Like if they know you're coming across, they could just snatch.
They could just sit on the side of the road and be like, "It's Monday. I'm going to wait." I mean, if they wanted to,
because they know where you're going to be.
I mean, that's paranoia on my part, but
so. I've actually been pleasantly surprised. I expected greater scrutiny than I've received from Customs and Border Patrol. That doesn't mean it can't happen tomorrow.
I would bring a passport, though, if I was going to go to Mexico.
It'll get you back in quicker if you do.
And you know this from personal experience.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not that bad, honestly. You know, they're just going to lecture you when you come back in. They told me about how grateful I should be that I live in the freest country in the world. Spent about a half an hour with Mr. Buzzcut.
This is the best the world's got to offer. The world needs to step up its game.
Yeah. Well, it's not the best the world has to offer. That's just mythology, as we know from the various different economic freedom studies that come out every single year that have the United States falling down the list. I think it was close to 20, maybe 17 or so in the, if I'm not mistaken, the Heritage Foundation's report. I don't have them in front of me.
I wouldn't put it that low. I mean, it's up there. But
okay, well, you need to
sad.
You need to do your own report, I guess, because these guys look at all kinds of factors, right? Like they look at a variety of economic factors, corruption, courts.
Yeah, but I don't think they weigh them properly.
Okay. Well, there's a couple different ones, and the United States is not in the top 10 on either of them. And one of them's made by a organization based here in the United States, the Heritage Foundation, kind of a conservative group, as I understand it. And the other one is, I think, Free the World, and I don't know, I think there's a couple different foundations that makes up that one.
They also, all the ones I've read, average out all the states. So it's like, well, if I don't live in California or New York,
right,
it doesn't matter that California won't let me do something. So if they're comparing really California and New York to every other country, and that's not entirely fair.
That's definitely true. I think that it would be wonderful if somebody would come out with a report that breaks out all of the states from the United States and ranks them separately along with these other countries. Because I think that would be really interesting to see, okay, well, if, California and New York, who are two of the most, just the absolute worst states when it comes to freedom, they're pulling down that average.
Yeah, so maybe New York's 19 and New Hampshire is 3. I mean,
that's the question, right? Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. I don't know who we talk to make that.
Do one of these foundations not do an internal one of the 50 states?
No, there's one that there is an organization that does the 50 states, but that's separate. That's the Freedom of the 50 States. Yeah, that's ranked against
just each other.
Right. So
although that wouldn't be fair either, because then I still have to deal with, I don't have to deal with California's laws, but I do have to deal with federal laws. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting anyone go do this. I'm just saying that's what you would need to have.
Yeah, I see. You
in
could give
order
it 2
to have
scores.
a fair assessment.
Maybe you could give it 2 scores, like have a federal score.
Yeah,
and
so
then
like federal and New Hampshire versus California and New Hampshire versus
Yeah, but if you're
Iraq.
in one of the states, you are under the jurisdiction of the federal government. So its laws and restrictions on economic freedom would still apply to you.
Yeah, so the feds would affect me, but California and New York don't.
Right, so we're going to exclude the other states, but that's no reason to exclude the federal government that applies to all of them.
Yeah, so it would have to be each state with also a federal law.
Yeah, I don't know if they're just looking at federal laws in those rankings.
The ones I've listed, they look at... It's like, well, California, this is illegal in California, therefore it counts against the U.S.
So it just lowers the whole bar for the entire... Yeah, that's no good.
So California is 20th out of all countries. Right. Like, okay, that tells me nothing.
So if California seceded, then that would help us a little bit. Although New York is even worse than California. If you look at the Freedom in the 50 States study, and you look at where New York is compared to California, because they do like not just a numbered ranking as far as 4950, but they also have a score, and the score for New York is way down. Like if you were charting it, it would be a huge cliff drop to get from California, which is terrible, to New York, which is like 10 times terrible. I mean, it's just
wow.
They can't make that distance up. Like I don't know what they could do. They would have to wait for California to get that much worse, but also New York continues to get worse. So like it's really a race to the bottom, and New York is winning it by a landslide.
I'm going to look into this. This is Freedom of the 50 States.
Freedom, I think it's in the Freedom in the 50 States. I believe the Cato Institute took it over from the Mercatus Center. It's actually created by Jason Sorens. He's one of the 2, I think, people who is the primary actors on that particular thing. He's the guy who founded the Free State Project.
I thought the name sounded familiar.
Yeah. And they recently recalculated in their 2018 edition, which is usually done off of like 2016's numbers, so it's usually a couple years behind as far as getting all the data taken care of. They had to recalculate, or for whatever reason, they recalculated certain factors, and Florida, surprisingly, took the number 1 spot from New Hampshire, even though it's a very, very close race, and even though, in my opinion, there's basically no comparison between New Hampshire and Florida.
Now, is it because Keene is bringing down New Hampshire's average?
No,
maybe we should do it by county or city.
I think they're looking at state level. Yeah, I think they're looking at state level. And plus, New Hampshire isn't what they call a home rule state, so there's not a whole lot that Keene as a city government can do that they haven't been authorized to do by the state government. There are some exceptions to that rule. There have been times where the Keene City Council has just basically been like, screw it. We'll just go ahead and pass something that's completely illegal and see what happens. And in their case, it actually worked out for them because the state ended up passing the same law after Keene passed something like it was the synthetic drugs ordinance that banned the use and possession of synthetic cannabis and things like that here in the city of Keene. So they just went ahead and did that illegally, but for the most part, they have to kind of stay within the restrictions that are put on them by the state government. And that actually keeps local governments from growing like super crazy and super prohibitionist and like way worse than even the state governments are. So it's in my opinion, not having home rule is actually a good thing. More coming up here in moments at the state level, at least. This is Free Talk Live, 855-450 free. We'll tell you about the person who was shot to death in Acapulco who considered himself an anarchist from the United States. This is Free Talk Live.
The Bitcoin.com wallet is a simple and powerful full-featured wallet that allows you to send and receive Bitcoin, BTC, and Bitcoin Cash, BCH, with anyone, anywhere in the world. It supports both single and multi-signature wallets and is available in multiple languages. The Bitcoin.com wallet is available on Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, and iOS devices. Use the Bitcoin.com wallet to buy, send, store, and receive both Bitcoin, BTC, and Bitcoin Cash, BCH. Learn more at wallet.bitcoin.com. That's wallet.bitcoin.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can dial on in here and take control of the airwaves toll free. Our number is 855-450, free like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We've also got the Discord on-air call-in line rooms over at discord.lrn.fm. So check that out when you get a chance. It's a great way to interact with other Free Talk Live listeners. and it's totally free. Once again, that's discord.lrn.fm. It's Ian, Melanie, and Aria in the studio tonight. Let's go to the phones before we tell you about the man shot to death in, I'm not sure if it was his own home, but it was an ugly situation down in Acapulco as an anarchist has been killed. And the big question is, was he selling drugs in competition with the cartels, as the rumor has said he was? Let's go to Matthew, listening in Louisiana. You're on Free Talk Live, listening via TuneIn. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I was wondering if y'all would know the answer to this, and maybe y'all don't, but I always hear racism being described as a quote-unquote right-wing philosophy, and I'm like, when did that ever happen?
I mean, I wouldn't even really call it a philosophy.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would either. Hitler was not right-wing. He instituted basically a government-controlled economy. Stalin had this issue with Jews. Wouldn't call him right-wing. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, how did this label get slapped on people who are, say to the right of Vladimir Lenin? Just strange.
Well, left and right in general have been pretty thoroughly corrupted within the last century here in the United States and in the West generally, where right means conservative and left means liberal, because liberalism and conservative have themselves been twisted into meaning things that they don't mean. Like Hitler absolutely was a full-blown liberal, a socialist all the way, wanted state control and... Mm-hmm.
Well, right-wingers want state control, too.
Yeah, as we would call them today, that would be liberal, but liberal in its true meaning means, liberation. Yeah.
Classical liberalism is kind of the philosophy that, I've studied, and I've decided there's a lot there, really, that we shouldn't just throw out because it's got, other people have abused the term liberal. I think it was the socialist candidate for president in 1936 said, there is no need for us to have a party anymore. The Democrats will adopt the label liberal, and they will do our work for us. And the news media makes a lot out of David Duke, but if you actually look at his economic philosophies, they're kind of, leftist. They're Marxist without the ugly Karl Marx.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't ever taken the time to look at anything David Duke has ever said. So
is that compared to, and I haven't looked at him either, other than to look up how many votes he got and mock the jurisdiction that he got them in. But is that compared to everybody in the area, or is that in a vacuum? Because they're pretty left economically down there anyway. They just don't think they are.
Well,
Louisiana.
The first time he ran in Ducktown.
Ducktown?
For state rep. Ducktown. D-U-C-K.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure what you were saying there. Go ahead.
Okay. I wasn't saying anything wrong.
Yeah.
And the folks down there are mostly hardworking but white fishermen. And they despise the fact that they thought all these black people were getting welfare benefits when they were out there busting their rear ends on these crab
right,
boats.
But that tells me nothing about their economic policy. There's plenty of people
they don't like welfare.
Who are mad but there's plenty of people who are mad that black people are on welfare when they themselves are on $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month in welfare. So this tells me nothing about their economic beliefs. And I don't know, because I am not going to take the time.
I don't think they studied economics when they left high school in the 8th grade, to be quite honest with you.
So they're simply using it as a vehicle to mask their racism.
I don't know that they were ever specifically racist per se, but very identitarian.
Well, if you divide people into groups on the basis of race,
racism.
then you're absolutely racist.
I think you guys are both talking.
A lot of people who say would not date or actively seek to hang out with people of a different race.
That is by
racism.
definition racist.
Yeah, we kicked them off the jury when our client was black.
I mean,
Well,
whether they're
if you don't
justified.
seek to hang out with somebody, that doesn't make you a racist.
If you don't seek to hang out with them on the basis of the race, it does by definition make you
They seek
racist.
to not hang out with them.
I'm not saying it's morally wrong or morally right.
That doesn't by definition make you racist. A racist is somebody who believes in the inferiority of another, race of people. If you believe in the concept of race, they believe that the races are different inherently and that there's inferior factors to these races, and they look down on them.
Many
because of
racists
it.
believe that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the two.
As I understand it, that is
ubiquitous.
the definition of racism.
That is the
Well, the
classic-
definition of
otherwise it's just
racism,
a preference.
if you
also have
Google
to
it now,
believe-
the definition of racism is like white people hate black people or something like that. So
Well, yeah, obviously
You also
words
have to
can change.
believe-
Go ahead.
I would go to a
You
more.
also have to believe you are fit to rule the other race.
You think so? Because a lot of the racists couch it in like, oh, well, I still believe that the Asians are smarter than white people. They'll sort of justify their racism against certain races by saying, well, I'm at least consistent. I believe that the Asians are much smarter, and it's still racism.
Maybe. I don't know. A lot of times I see people paying so much attention to intelligence quotient, you think that they've substituted the bell curve, the bell curve for the Bible. They practically worship.
They do.
That book.
You're right about that. Thank you, Matthew, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The toll-free number here, 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. Here's the dictionary.com definition for right now. Because, again, you're right. Words do change over time in their meanings based on common popular usage. But number one here, a belief or doctrine that inherent differences among the various human racial groups determine cultural or individual achievement, usually involving the idea that one's own race is superior and has the right to dominate others, or that a particular racial group is inferior to the others. So it doesn't have to mean that you believe that you should be dominating the others, but it does, frequently it's found to mean that. So that's racism. So just having a preference of who you hang out with, doesn't mean that you're a racist.
Well, so to me, it's a form of groupthink. You're dividing people into groups, and you're saying, I don't want to associate with this group, and it's because of race. That, to me, is the definition of racism. I'm not saying it's bad or morally wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that that is the word I would use to describe it.
Yeah, I don't know. Just because in that case you're not saying that it's because you believe they are inferior.
I feel like that's heavily implied, because why would I not want to hang out with an equal or superior person?
Okay, you could say that, but there are certainly plenty of people who want to hang out with, let's say, do you have a lot of female friends, Melanie?
Actually, no.
So what does that make you?
Okay, but you said intentionally avoid or seek out.
Do you intentionally avoid or seek out relationships with women?
No.
So it just happens to be that you don't have very many of them?
Yes.
You wouldn't say that you have a preference for spending time with men?
You could argue that based on the stats.
If you had a preference based on, a preference of hanging out with men over women, would that make you a bigot? Because if it doesn't make you a bigot,
you could say it would make me sexist. Bigot is kind of a more
it just means you
term.
have a preference. A sexist would be meaning that you believe one sex is superior to the other, doesn't it?
And if you could demonstrate that I preferred one over the other for friendships, then you would demonstrate that I was sexist.
I think I, at the very least, just demonstrated that you have a preference. There's more coming up here in moments. 855-450, free like freedom, Free Talk Live. This is Free Talk Live. You can join us here talking about racism, which wasn't, anybody's intended topic, but it's open phones, which means you can bring up anything, and that's what I enjoy about doing this show is your input and taking us in a direction we didn't necessarily intend to go. And we got into an interesting conversation about, what is actually racism. Is having a preference that may or may not even be something that you intentionally move towards, is that racist? And I'm saying it's not. Now, in most cases, people who specifically want to be separated probably are racist, meaning they probably want to be separated from other races because they believe the other races are inferior. That's likely their motivating factor for wanting to be a separatist in that case. However, there are plenty of people who just simply exercise a preference, and in some cases it's exercised not really by intent. So, for instance,
I don't agree that inferiority and superiority necessarily play into it. Like, as somebody has into whether or not one is racist or sexist or whatever. Like, if you take a guy who doesn't have sex with guys, it's not necessarily because he thinks guys are inferior. It's
That's right.
just a preference.
It's a preference.
But it is still, by definition, sexist.
Is it?
Well, I don't think that's sexist. That's something you have no control over. He's not saying men are inferior. I prefer not to be around men. It's something
Well, I said it's not about inferiority. I mean, it's just his preference. But that preference is sexist. And I'm okay with that. I've argued extensively that sexism is not necessarily bad.
Well, sexism, according to the dictionary here, is attitudes or behavior based on traditional stereotypes of gender roles. That's definition 1. Definition 2, discrimination or devaluation based on a person's sex or gender, as in restricted job opportunities, especially such discrimination directed against women. And I guess you're right. I mean, that is, you're discriminating, right? Like, you have decided, I don't want to have sex with men. So you are discriminating against them. It's not because you dislike them or anything like that. It's just you don't want to stick it in them, right? Basically. And that's just, that's just
a valid preference.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a valid preference. In the same way that when, let's say, like here in Keene, New Hampshire, there aren't very many people who aren't white. And that's unfortunate, I think. I like to see diversity. I like the different restaurants, for instance, that diversity brings, the different flavors in life that happens. But would it surprise you to find that black people in a place like that are more likely to associate with the other black people who are around?
No.
Not because,
I mean, I'm from Mississippi,
right,
though. So.
Not because they are racist, but simply because of some sort of innate, natural
But isn't
attraction.
collectivism on the basis of racism?
No.
That sort of tribalism, isn't that?
No, not unless you're talking about something that happens. Again, I think racism has to do with the belief that one race is superior to another. Okay, because
I don't think that's inherently part of it.
Well,
it's usually part of it.
You can pull up whatever definition that you want to here, but if it's not based on hatred, then what is racism? Okay, if it's not based on the belief,
well, we've already agreed
hatred.
that one can discriminate against men without it being based on hatred.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't we just substitute the word race for the word men and make
because
exactly the same
racism has a definition, and it has to do with the belief that your race determines certain things about you, and usually people believe that makes them either superior or inferior based on their race.
Usually, but not necessarily.
Well, in that case, then you would have to acknowledge that the former part is a true statement, right? Because if racism is simply, if we leave out the discrimination, if we leave out the belief of superiority and all that, if racism is simply looking at differences between races, then is that what you're saying, that you believe that the definition of racism is just examining?
My definition would be that it's collectivism on the basis of race.
Well, that is collectivism, right? Looking at people and saying, well, you must be this way because of your race. It's not true necessarily.
Well,
right?
that's collectivizing a person. And I don't know if, well, I certainly wouldn't.
But that's the point of
do
racism.
Any of it, so,
But hold on, that's the point of racism, right? Is to look at somebody and prejudge them. And that's what's wrong with racism, is to look at somebody and prejudge them based on, oh, well, the statistics say people in your race are less intelligent. And people like Chris Cantwell can pull up statistics all day long to back up their arguments. And the reason why I don't fight with people like Chris Cantwell on those things is because I don't have other statistics, and I don't want to do the research to try to battle with statistics when it's just this never-ending statistics war. And of course, everybody can find statistics that back up whatever, viewpoint it is they have. But since my viewpoint is based on the individual, I say throw all the statistics out.
I'm with you on that.
Right, because the statistics don't matter. So
Right. They're neat case studies and aggregates and statistics.
Yeah.
But that's all they are.
Well, and promulgating those statistics would make you a racist. Now, whether or not you think that you're inferior or not is another question.
Promulgating statistics would make you a racist?
If we're going with the definition that Aria is saying, she's saying that it doesn't have to do necessarily with the belief that another race is inferior, right? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what you're saying, right?
So stating fact. No, I mean, are we disputing? And I haven't looked into it because I do not care.
This topic is called race realism, and the alt-right and the Cantwell types,
which is a cover.
A lot. Yeah.
That's a cover for people who don't want to explain why they are talking about that, right?
Right.
So the reason why people talk about race realism is to promulgate racism without calling it that, without necessarily, it's just a code word. That's all that is.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we're so deep into this conversation, I'm not really sure what we're trying to say at this point, Melanie.
Racism is bad.
It is bad because it ignores the individual.
Absolutely.
Okay, so even if the statistics are true and that from certain countries or certain colors of skin happen to have an average lower IQ or whatever, I don't care because I just want to know about you. And I don't want to – it's not fair to just, judge somebody based on – this is why when Chris Cantwell was in this studio doing Freer Talk Live, I'll cede whatever claims he wants to make to the supposed facts about the races. Go ahead, throw out all your so-called race realism, and I will reject every single bit of it because I just want to know about the individual.
I mean, it's about as rational as assuming that everyone you come across has an IQ of 100 because the average IQ is 100. That would not be a very useful way to go through life.
Right.
So if there are different statistics, then I don't read them because I don't find them relevant.
I'm not sure it's not a useful way to go through life, though. I mean, it's kind of key to evolution and humanity's survival as a whole to just assume that the bear is going to be dangerous.
Right, but if you have other information, if you're like, well, I'm going to assume that Ian has an IQ of 100 because I know that the average human has an IQ of 100, I have evidence to the contrary, so that would be really asinine.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a denial of reality.
Right. So the average, I'm not going to ever be dealing with masses and masses of people. I'm only ever going to be dealing with individuals in small groups. So it doesn't really matter what those stats are.
Well, but to Cantwell, and this is part of what we got into on Freer Talk Live, from his viewpoint, he wants to separate people, right? So he wants to separate into his little white society or whatever it is that he wants. And it doesn't matter to him that black people can have the same exact viewpoint as far as conservatism, because now Cantwell is a conservative. So I asked him, well, what about the black conservatives? Why wouldn't you want them, helping in your fight against the Red Scare or the Red Menace or whatever it is? He's against the communists. So why wouldn't you want to take people on who are willing to help you? And he basically said he's just willing to chuck them all out because it's a lot easier to just discriminate on the basis of race rather than having to actually consider the individual, rather than having to, even though in your life all you do is meet individuals.
And if you were faced with that task, that would be accurate, but the reality of the situation is that none of us, including Chris, are ever going to be rearranging populations in a country.
Well, maybe Chris could get really Bitcoin wealthy and he could start his own Chris Land, and then he could have big fences and he could, screen applicants. And in that case, he would want to throw out the applications of anybody who wasn't of the same color as him simply through laziness. He admitted on the air on that show.
That's certainly lazy.
And he admitted that.
Yeah.
Because I cornered him on it, because that's really all it is. It's like, oh, well, even though you agree with this person, minus the race thing, you agree with their opinions, but you chuck them out because they have the same skin color as people who you don't agree with, who might be in the majority in that particular racial group. So you're just willing to just chuck everybody out. And he's basically said, yeah. So it's just pure laziness. So, I mean, so again, back to what your definition of racism is here, you're saying, Aria, it doesn't have to necessarily do with someone believing that another race is inferior. But how many people believe in this race realism stuff, which is just a cover, who don't believe in the inferiority of those other races? How many of them are there?
Well, even if it's only one person, that's enough of a distinction for the different words to be different words.
We're coming up. It's Free Talk Live. Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, Doug Casey, Larkin Rose. The biggest names in the liberty movement will be at the largest gathering of freethinkers, voluntarists, libertarians, and ANCAPs in Acapulco, Mexico from February 14th through the 19th, 2019 at Anarchapulco. You'll love the lineup of speakers for 4 days among the sun and beaches of a world-class resort. Go to anarchapulco.com and use code FTL to register and receive 15% off. Anarchapulco.com, code FTL.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You bring up whatever you want. We're launching into the second hour of the program. Still to come, the story out of Acapulco where a self-described anarchist has been shot to death, ostensibly because he was involved in the drug trade down there. Now, that's may or may not be the truth. That's the rumor that has been present. Joining you in the studio tonight, by the way, it's Ian,
Melanie,
and Aria.
We ended up getting onto the topic of racism in the last hour due to a caller. It's somehow brought up. Oh, yeah, the question originally was, well, why is this always being painted on the right? Was, I think, essentially what the caller was.
Because the left is really good at diversion, and they both do it.
Well, both both do diversion, but both sides are also in a lot of ways
the left
racist.
Is good at diversion.
Well, the left characterizes manifest destiny. I mean, that's all it is today. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you ask these white liberals in California about voter ID laws and things like that, they will straight up tell you black people can't find the DMV.
Oh my!
Yeah, it's horrific.
The rich white liberals that I know, or rich white leftists, I should say, that I know, are oftentimes more racist than the people who wear swastikas.
Right. Whether they're rich or not, people on the left also have racist, beliefs. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them do. I don't know what the percentage.
Not all.
Yeah, I don't know what the percentage of people on the left or the right are that are racist. I mean, I imagine there's the percentage that will be vocal about it, and then there's the percentage that believes it but won't be vocal about it. And I don't know what that what those numbers add up to. I hope they're not very large, because I would like to see racism go away. It's at some point in life it would be nice to have that be a vestige of the past.
I would say only individualists are not racist, and that's true. We're maybe 0.01% of the population.
Wow. All right. Well, that's way lower than I mean, individualists are a low number, but I would hope that you're wrong that others who aren't individualists are also not necessarily racist. I don't know if they necessarily are, because people aren't always judging by the color of someone's skin. They probably are judging maybe because of the religion that they are or the plot of land from which they hail. But I'm hoping that most of them aren't all about the color of somebody's skin. Let's go to Sam in New York. And Sam, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead with your thoughts.
All right. Hi. So basically, I understand where Aria's at about the whole racism thing not being about inferiority. I agree with that also.
Well, you're ignoring the definition of it, as Aria is also. K-Dust in the chat room says you're wrong on this, Aria.
The definition you literally read a few minutes ago said I was right.
Well, here's another one for you. Here's a second, before we go on with this, here's scrolling down the page, because dictionary.com has multiple sources in some cases.
Well, the first one you gave said I was right. That's why I added it usually involves
so here's the other one. This
whatever.
Is the British, wait, no, that's sexism. Hang on a second. British dictionary definition for racism: the belief that races have distinctive cultural characteristics determined by hereditary factors, and that this endows some races with an intrinsic superiority over others. And that, to me, makes more sense, because the people that could possibly fit this initial definition that you were talking about, where they believe that there are distinctive cultural characteristics determined by hereditary factors, and not at the same time hold that makes them inferior or superior. I've never met that person. So anyway, go ahead, Sam. Are you saying you're one of those people?
Yeah, I mean, because when I was brought up that racism is about prejudice, just like ageism and sexism is all based on prejudice. You're judging someone before you know them based on their sex, their age, or their race.
Right, but what are you judging about them?
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, I may
give me an
judge
example
them inside of my oh lordy.
I would say you're judging that they're different from you, most likely, because they have these characteristics, but just stating that they're different from you or assuming that they're different doesn't necessarily mean
different
greater
in what
or
way?
less.
Let's get specific.
More likely to like hip-hop. Let's keep this as non-offensive as possible. I would say that's neither inferior nor superior, but it's certainly a racist belief.
That's
right,
interesting.
Or that I like reggae.
I don't know if that's a racist belief because it doesn't have anything to do. Hold on, Sam. I don't think it's a racist belief because it doesn't have anything to do with an inherent characteristic about them. They happen to like hip hop because they're in that particular group of people, likely when they're growing up. Who
but
already
culturally,
has that.
what led to the creation of hip hop? Was it not the drum beats in Africa?
Perhaps. But what does that have to do with racism? Again, what does that have to do with the idea that there's an inherent difference among their racial group? Does that have to do with them liking drum beats?
Well, the definition you just gave said it manifests in cultural tendencies or something to that effect. That would be one of the cultural tendencies that I would say is manifesting.
Determined by hereditary factors, meaning that something about their race makes them X.
Makes them culturally or ethnically inclined to do X or Y.
You really believe that? You don't think other people like drum beats too?
In regard to hip-hop? Oh, I mean, we know they do. Led Zeppelin took the idea and made it.
There's plenty of white kids that like hip-hop.
Sure.
If you point to a white young person...
I'm not a racist.
I know you're not. I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying here. If you look at a young white person, odds are they're into hip-hop too, right? These days.
Sure. Well, that's
Does that
ageist.
say something about their race?
No, that's ageist, Ian.
But it's not looking down on that person because of it.
I'm of the mind that these collectivists and these collectivist ideas don't necessarily involve inferiority or superiority.
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so the other day at work, there is this black male that is the same age as me. We're off by like a couple years. And I was preaching individualism, and because I personally believe I'm an individualist, I see everyone as a person, as themselves, not their background or whatever. And this kid kept like saying, well, no, blacks are suppressed because of this, and that, and kept bringing up racism and how he's inferior because of, he gets less things and he's not as gifted as all these other people because he's black and he was put in that group and not by his choice, but that's how he was born. And I'm sitting here like, well, then stand up as an individual and be an individual.
So
you don't have to associate with all those people.
He was like criticizing himself on the basis of his own skin color? That's unusual.
He was basically saying like, oh, well, you're a white female. You don't know how it is because,
I mean, was he talking about you benefited from cultural privilege that he doesn't have? Or was he talking about like
basically
he's genetically less gifted because of his skin color?
I think it was more on the white privilege side of it, that I have white privilege because I was born with light colored skin. Not that I get what that matters. And
it'll make you get
pulled in my life.
It'll get you pulled over less for the same driving habits.
I don't know. I've been pulled over a lot.
Okay, well, I don't know anything about your driving habits, but...
Well, you are a woman.
I drive tractor trailer. I get pulled over a lot.
Yeah, so what you're describing that he's saying, and I wasn't there, and what you're saying is not... I don't think it's accurate, but it's not mutually exclusive. So if there is someone going around doing horrible things to all the black people, individualism is still true, but that doesn't mean that horrible things aren't happening to all the black people. The things that happen, I think, are kind of lied about which things. Like you're still going to have the same opportunities to go get jobs and go to school and all that stuff. Well,
it depends on where. I mean, there are definitely some places where you're not going to have the same opportunities to get jobs.
in the U.S.
Well, individualism
in the
is
US.
certainly the goal, but we can't deny the fact that there are collectivists out there. Many of them do so on the basis of race, and many of them are in positions of power, and they use their biases to inflict harm on these groups that they have collectivized.
And some of them aren't even necessarily doing it, collectively or like consciously. They're doing it based on prejudices that may have been inculcated at a very young age that don't necessarily have to do with any active thought of racism or active belief in the inferiority of another race. Thanks for the call, Sam. I appreciate hearing from you. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. You can bring up anything that you want and take control of the airwaves here on Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live. Dial in toll free. Bring up anything you want. Our number here, 855-450-FREE like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Smart Cash. It is a peer-to-peer digital currency. It's one of the newer ones out there, and it is on sale right now. When I say that, I mean the price has gone down. It was as high as like 2-something cents recently. It's now down to just over 1 cent as of a couple of days ago for one Smart Cash. Now, if you have one Smart Cash, you have a vote. If you want to cast your votes in their voting system that they have, which helps them kind of govern the currency and decide what they're going to spend essentially their marketing budget on. You can participate in the Smart Hive Project Treasury simply by having a Smart Cash. And again, since it's 1 cent for one, you can easily have thousands of them. You can get 1,000 Smart Cash for just over $10 right now. Smartcash.cc is where you can go to learn more. And in fact, if you have 1,000 Smart and you put it into a Smart Wallet, which of course they have mobile versions and desktop versions of their wallet software at smartcash.cc, you put it in there for at least a month's time and don't spend out of the wallet, meaning don't touch the savings. You can add to it, you just can't spend from it. Then you will receive Smart Rewards basically once a month. Go to smartcash.cc. That's smartcash.cc, and you can learn more about yet another great cryptocurrency that allows you to be more, I would say, involved than some of the others out there. Smartcash.cc. Let's go to Sarah. She's in New Mexico. Sarah, you are on Free Talk Live. Now, you're not a racist, are you, Sarah?
Oh, no, I'm not. No, I treat everybody the same.
Everybody the same, meaning you would treat somebody the same if they attacked you, physically. You would treat them the same in the future.
No, not by their color.
Okay.
The color of their skin. I treat everybody the same.
Gotcha.
It's an inner person. But,
that's good. So you look at the individual, basically, is what you're saying.
Right.
See, Sarah's an individualist.
I'm ashamed.
My battery's going to cut out. I want to get to my point here. You know what? We're going to raise the cigarette tax for $1.50 per pack here. We're going to.
You're raising it an extra $1.50 or to $1.50 per pack?
No, extra.
Okay.
Whatever it's on right now, we're going to tack on another $50.
Now, is this just in Albuquerque or is this the state of New Mexico?
The whole state of New Mexico.
Okay.
I think that this is done at the Santa Fe, the Roundhouse. And it's just going to fly right through because the anti-tobacco is a Democrat bill. Usually, we're against the big tobacco companies, and we're
how do you feel about the big tobacco companies?
What do you think?
How do you feel about the big tobacco companies? I mean, where do you side on the issue?
I am tortured. You know what? They are giant big companies. They have made money by killing people. And they need to pay out, and they're going to have no people buying their junk. And also, I am tortured by the smokers at the bus stop. The less people could buy them, it's going to be like $8 a pack. There's going to be less people torturing me at the bus stop.
See, so Sarah believes that if the taxes go up, fewer people will smoke. What do you think?
I think that's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
I think the demand for addictive substances is pretty inelastic.
If you tax something, you get less of it. I mean, certainly. But there are solutions that don't cost an arm and a leg. And the cigarette prices in the Southwest are already really high.
According to a news story at Las Cruces Sun News, the current tax on a pack of cigarettes in New Mexico is $1.66. So they are talking about nearly doubling. So not quite a 100% increase, but darn close to 100% increase in taxes. And our own Mark Edge, who is a regular co-host here, well, not during the winter, but normally a regular co-host. He will be on within the next few days, as long as everything goes well in Acapulco. He's one of the people who actually the taxation going up led him to quit smoking. So does that mean we should have more taxes?
Well, the thing about it is that, Democrats want the free health care, and then when they get sick, we have to pay out. We have to pay for their oxygen. So we're just collecting the damage deposit up front right now.
I mean, then quit having free health care.
Yeah, what if you didn't have to pay for their health care?
Well, the thing is, Democrats were into giving free health care, right?
Okay, so you are a Democrat.
She's a communist. Self-proclaimed.
We're going to have to pay out for them anyways.
But you don't have to. You're choosing to. I mean, that's your preferred ideology. You want to pay out for them, right? Do you not want to pay for everyone's health care?
That's correct, but that's the reason why.
As long as they engage in only behaviors that you personally approve of.
Or else she'll tax it.
See, the tax they're paying now is so that we can help them out later when they're dying.
Yeah, the state doesn't save money that good.
If the state lowered their taxes, maybe they could put that $1.50 per pack aside and pay for their own health care.
Yeah, but people aren't that responsible, right, Aria?
No, they're not.
Well, the thing that the way that it's working
but I mean,
out
all this
now,
is taking place in magical fairyland where the government's going to provide people health care anyway.
Well, yeah, because the reality is when the government gets in charge of health care, now, Sarah, maybe you don't want it to be this way, but the way it is they will have a death panel that will decide whether or not to give the person the assistance. Because while the health care's free, and I'm putting quotes around that, it's only at the pleasure of the state. They don't have an obligation to take care of somebody just because they smoked their whole life. And if you are, let's say you're 86 years old and you come down with, chronic pulmonary lung disease or whatever, some sort of horrible emphysema or whatever, and it's because of smoking, and you go into the hospital and like, well, we're going to need to do X, Y, and Z to you, and it's going to cost this amount of money. And, well, even though the health care is free, lady, we just don't really feel like giving it to you because, I mean, you're going to die pretty soon anyway. You're 86 years old. So what's the interest? I mean, you're not paying taxes anymore. You're retired, right? So like, yeah, maybe you're paying a property tax or something like that, but you're not producing like the 20-year-olds or the 30-year-olds or the 40-year-olds who don't have these issues. They don't go to the hospital as often, so it costs a heck of a lot more to take care of a bunch of old folks who didn't take care of themselves. What makes you think the government's going to even help these people down the line with the cigarette tax?
Well, you know what? The thing about it is that whether they do or not, I mean, most of them, they get taken care of if they're dying, if they're suffocating, we'll give them oxygen. But I like the idea of getting money out of them now every time they buy a pack of cigarettes to kill themselves. That's the part I like.
You like the
about
idea
it.
of it. Whether or not it actually makes a difference is another question.
Okay,
right?
but they're going to collect those $1.50s. They're going to waste it now, and then 30 years
saving it.
from now, when they're dying from lung cancer, they're not going to have those $1.50s because they're already wasted it.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's not that Democratic logic, but that's my logic. I like getting money out of them now.
You're not getting the money, just so you know.
What you're talking about is not a matter of any kind of logic. I mean, it's not. We saw this play out with Social Security, with the government like, hey, we're going to take a part of your money, and we're going to put it back, and we're going to help you retire on it. And they're like, oh, crap, we spent all of your money.
Sarah, why not go all the way and just advocate the total ban of cigarettes? That's what they're talking about in Hawaii.
Well, you know what? I would prefer that. I would prefer that. But you know how it is.
Thank you for the call tonight. Toll-free number here is 855-450-FREE. The reality, of course, is prohibition doesn't work, and in many cases creates the opposite of the intended consequences. But we may see Hawaii nonetheless go for it and give it a shot. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you operate a retail business and are looking for a solution for point-of-sale cryptocurrency acceptance? It's never been easier thanks to AnyPay.Global. There's no paperwork or approval process to open an account. If you already have a tablet at your cash register, you're almost done. Just sign up at AnyPay.Global. Drop your personal crypto wallet addresses in our setup page, and then load our app. That's it. You're accepting cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Dash at your store. Get started now at AnyPay.Global. That's anypay.global.
It's Free Talk Live. Dial on in here, toll free, bring up whatever you want. Our number is 855-450, free like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We've also got the Discord on-air call-in line rooms, and the Discord chat server is available to you over at discord.lrn.fm. So head on over there and enjoy the features that allow you to chat with other Free Talk Live listeners. And during our live show, you can get on the air with us and sound almost like you're sitting here in the studio. With you tonight, by the way, in that studio, it's Ian,
Melanie,
and Aria.
All right, so let's get into the news headlines that I teased an hour and a half ago on Free Talk Live, which is fine because that's, we like participation. Mexico City, the story coming from the Associated Press's Amy Guthrie, filed on Sunday. An American anarchist who went by the name John Galton was shot dead. Do you think that was his given name?
I'm guessing not.
Was shot dead at his home in the Mexican resort of Acapulco. Apparently, the entire city of Acapulco is a resort, according to the Associated Press.
Do they know that?
Sending shivers through a tight-knit anti-establishment community of expatriates that organizes events in the violence-torn retreat with seminars on topics such as how to make money via cryptocurrencies. A woman describing herself as John's partner, Lily, said via social media that she saw the gunman go straight for John and his friend Jason Henza, age 43. Henza made it to a private hospital with bullet wounds in his armpit, leg, and hand. The hospital said he checked out the same day. Mexican police found equipment to process drugs, glass pipes, and marijuana plants at the home. Now, equipment to process drugs can mean a lot of things.
In the U.S., it can mean a lot of things. I don't know what it can mean in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, processing drugs, they make it sound like it's some sort of big operation. They could have simply had a scale.
Or a grinder.
Yeah, right. So it might not have even been to sell drugs. But that has...
You usually buy your way out of that in Mexico, too.
What, a criminal charge?
Drugs.
Buy your way out of drugs?
Well, yeah, but he was shot by people.
What do you mean, buy your way out of drugs?
Like, if the cops are like, I see drugs, and you're like, here's $100. And
Yeah, bribing the cops, sure. This guy's unfortunately dead at this point, so he wasn't able to bribe his way out of the whatever gang it was that decided to take his life and attempt to take the life of his buddy. He wasn't able to bribe his way out. I
said he was discharged.
The guy who was the other guy was discharged.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they attempted to take the life of his buddy.
So this is the same people who... A few days ago, it was like they refused to hire a hitman, so he shot them.
That's part of...
Is this the same group of people?
So I don't know what... Nobody knows what the actual story is here, right? But yes, it's the same... Only one anarchist has been killed in Acapulco thus far that we know of, as far as in a shooting or whatever.
Same event, though.
The shooting, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. And as far as events are concerned, these are the organizers, apparently, of Anarchaforco, which is a forked event from Anarchapulco that started, I think, last year was the first time they did Anarchaforco. It comes after Anarchapulco, which is the event that I will be broadcasting from along with Mark coming up here in about 10 days from now. So Anarchaforco came off of that, and the idea was they thought Anarchapulco was getting too kind of, I don't know, corporate or whatever, but, to get back into the city of Acapulco rather than be cloistered off at a resort, basically. Because if you go to Anarchapulco, then if you stay at the resort, you don't actually get to Acapulco. You come into the airport, you take a cab into the resort, and you stay in the resort. If you want to stay out of Acapulco, if you think Acapulco is like super dangerous or whatever. But if you actually want to get out into the city, you got to leave the resort property. So I like going out into the city because that's the real Acapulco, right? Like that's where you go and you get cheap tacos at a taqueria or, go shopping or whatever. And there's like cliff divers and there's all kinds of, neat stuff to go around and do. But saying that they found equipment to process drugs, we don't know what that really means. I mean, marijuana plants, again, they could have had 3 plants in the closet growing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they had an entire operation.
They could have had a spoon.
For drugs, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had people in the U.S., charged with drug paraphernalia for, really silly things. he had one Ziploc bag and a spoon.
Right.
It had ice cream on it, but it was for meth.
Or if you have 2 bags of marijuana, all of a sudden you're a dealer charge in the United States. Yeah. So, again, we don't know exactly if it's true that these people were dealing, but that's the rumor. All right. So that's what, that's what I've heard from Mark, as the rumor. He hasn't said for sure. In fact, he says that maybe they weren't actually dealing. But if that were the case, then what's the deal with this person who shot them? What's that all about? Is it just a crazy person? Because it's one or the other, right? You either have a lunatic who, for whatever reason, decided to shoot an anarchist or a couple of anarchists. And I've heard the rumors about this person that they claimed they were an anarchist, but maybe they weren't or whatever. Who knows? I don't know anything about this person. Or was it an actual gangland shooting against a competitor? Because they were allegedly selling cocaine and marijuana.
Yeah, I mean, so I would want to stay away from... There's no evidence that they shot him because he was an anarchist. So I don't want to say every time something bad happens to an anarchist, it was a targeted thing. That's ridiculous.
Well, it was a targeted thing.
Yeah, but bad thing...
This was not a random shooting. They didn't just randomly bust into somebody's house and blow away a couple people.
It seems more likely to me that it was drug-related.
Seems like it, doesn't it?
Then it was because he was an anarchist.
Now, whether or not this alleged crazy person, whoever is the suspected killer or the person who ordered the hit or whatever, what their deal is, I don't know. And again, everything I'm hearing is hearsay. And that's true of the person writing this article here, by the way, which gets into a little bit of opinion about anarchists. So we'll continue. Lily and Henza both posted videos to Facebook immediately after the shooting. Lily screamed, "I really need help. Somebody please come." In his post, a bearded Henza said in a blood-smattered T-shirt, "We were attacked. I've been shot 3 times. I'm not doing so good." Now, this is interesting, right? The idea of you've just been shot.
So you go to Facebook.
And you post on Facebook. Now, look, if they're true anarchists, right, then they wouldn't go to the police, I suppose.
Fair enough. That is not how that works. It might be in Mexico. I don't know enough about Mexico, but...
Well, are the police really going to help you in this circumstance? Especially if you're a drug dealer.
So that would be reasons why it would be a bad idea to go to the police. Mm-hmm. You're not prohibited from using state services because you're an anarchist.
No, I understand that. But the purest anarchists would proudly not go to the police even while, bleeding out.
I'll just sit here and bleed to death.
So somebody who is more worried about their anarcho street cred than whether or not they bleed out on the side of the road would have some ridiculous thing about not calling 911.
Well, this guy, John Galton, he died a pure anarchist.
If the state monopolizes a service, you're not now prohibited from using all services that the state monopolizes.
Well, plus
what about Cell 411?
I don't know if they use it.
411 does not have paramedics.
Well, no, but it has a report of something's wrong with me, like I'm sick or I'm hurting or whatever. There is.
Okay, so what I'm going to do? I'm going to call the ambulance and be like, my friend on Cell 411 said he needed an ambulance. He didn't want to call it himself.
Well, no, it could be that your friend would get there faster and then get you to the hospital sooner.
Okay, but if you need immediate help, then you need paramedics in a hospital. Like maybe I can bring you to the hospital. It depends on if you're stable.
Right.
They were stable enough to do a Facebook video.
Maybe they shouldn't have been doing a Facebook video.
Well, look, here's the thing. Like, it doesn't say whether or not they called the police. Okay, just to be clear on that. But it was a shooting, so somebody heard it, and there's a good chance somebody's calling the cops. Maybe not. Maybe it's the kind of neighborhood, because I did hear they lived in a bad neighborhood as well. So made a few mistakes here, right? Move into a bad part of town, allegedly dealing drugs. And allegedly dealing with a lunatic who maybe they didn't know he was crazy, because sometimes you don't find those things out until later. But there's some possible mistakes here. At the very least, they may not have had to call the police because somebody could have just called it in due to hey, my neighbors just had gunshots fired next door. That probably wasn't an accident, given that it happened more than once, right?
Or maybe somebody who saw the Facebook Live video called the cops and knew where he was.
Well, that's a possibility too. So, like, if you go to Facebook, you're basically in public, even if you share it with your friends or whatever. They sometimes can share it with their friends, or maybe you don't know what your sharing settings are in the moment while you are, bleeding out, and you're not really checking those details. So you may end up giving the police more evidence to convict you in that case if you blab about it on Facebook. But anyway, more coming up about the shooting in Acapulco in moments. is Free Talk Live. You can dial in toll-free and take control of the airwaves here. You can bring up anything that you want. And by the way, I want to say thank you to Mal Escalvo, who is a Free Talk Live amplifier, somebody who is a supporter of what we do here. In fact, he's a gold amplifier, which means he gives $10 per month to the AMP program. AMP stands for Advertise, Market, and Promote. And that actually allows you to get behind what we do here with your it's $5 is all we ask for, but he's doing 10. So thank you for the extra. But if you do $5 a month, you get some perks, you get some benefits, like access to the supporters chat rooms on our Discord server, the AMP-only Facebook group, and more. You can get all the details over at amp.freetalklive.com. That's amp.freetalklive.com. And you can get signed up with PayPal. You can use credit card or Bitcoin BTC. So it's up to you over at amp.freetalklive.com. Now, it's a tragic situation in Acapulco, Mexico, as an anarchist has been shot to death. He called himself John Galton. He and his friend were shot, Jason Henza. Henza survived, wounded in the armpit, leg, and hand. He survived after a visit to the hospital. John Galton, however, shot to death, apparently at his home, by the way, in the city of Acapulco. Rumor has it that they did not live in the best part of town, and further rumor has it that they were allegedly selling cannabis and or cocaine. And the fact is, if that's true, then it wouldn't surprise me that this was a drug-related gangland-style killing.
I would not want to compete with the Mexican cartels.
Heck no. These guys are serious business.
Yeah, they're the we will cut your fingers off and send them to your family types.
Right, well, he didn't even get that chance.
Yeah.
You know? Prior to the shooting, John and Lily, there's also another theory that it was just a crazy person, just a lunatic.
They could have just been being robbed, too, and happened to have drugs.
Could be. But it sounds like it was a targeted, at least according to the way the posts were made, it sounds like it was targeted. It sounds like they went there for the purposes of killing that person and maybe attempting to kill his friend as well. Because apparently they didn't kill the woman. So, I don't know. Well, maybe we will learn more as this goes on. But prior to the shooting, now this is where they kind of get into their commentaries. This is supposed to be a news piece by the Associated Press about an anarchist killed in Acapulco, which of course means they have to talk about anarchism. And having the mainstream media talk about anarchism is always interesting. So prior to the shooting, John and Lily hosted weekly meetups with quotes around it. Meat, spelled M-E-A-T, at a local restaurant where self-professed carnivores dine only on meat. They were also busy. Don't they do that out in Manchester, in New Hampshire?
No,
they have
meetups. I have never heard of a carnivore meetup with only meat.
They have that.
What do you eat if your only dining option is meat?
Well, it's just
a bunch of meat.
It's just at this event. I mean, they probably eat other things at other times, but they go to a restaurant where they just have a bunch of meat served to them, basically.
Just meat.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Well, whatever floats your boat.
Not even any potatoes or carrots or anything with it?
So in Manchester, and it's maybe they don't do it anymore, Melanie, but there was a time when Mark and I went out. We met up with who's now a state representative, Jason Osborne, and they had this thing called Meat Lunch, where they would go to a Brazilian barbecue place or something like that, and they had a bunch of meat. And that's pretty much all they ate. Now, there was also a buffet at the time, so I was able to get things that weren't just meat.
Okay, well, that's not what you described. You said people were eating only meat a carnivore meetup.
Right. That's what the intention of the meetup is. That's why they call it, in this case, meat, spelled M-E-A-T.
Okay, so everybody else was not eating any sides at all?
I didn't take real close look at what everybody else was eating, but that's the intention of this particular gathering.
That's silly.
Whatever, man. Some people are really into bacon and really into ham and whatever other stuff.
I think the only people who eat meat to the exclusion of all other foods are doing it to prove some kind of silly point.
Well, doing it once a week. I
don't think it's all the time. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't live that lifestyle, so I have no idea.
If it's a lifestyle, it's not once a week.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if it is or it isn't. I know they had at the very least an occasional meetup in Manchester for this purpose of just, we love meat, so let's get together and have lunch and eat all meat. That's what they do. Now,
I love meat too, but it's so strange.
I'm still going to eat some sides with it.
Everybody's got to have a hobby, right? Like your hobby
vegetables, potato maybe.
Last night you were playing the Chris Cantwell video game, and it was awful apparently on your.
Did we expect it to be good?
On your Twitch stream, that's your hobby. A lot of people aren't going to understand, why you would want to do something like that, but
I don't understand why I want to.
Right, and I don't know how many of them understand why they want to go to a meetup, but they did. They also were busy recruiting speakers for an Anarchist conference set to take place in Acapulco in later February. The dreadlocked couple, both in their 20s, posted a video to Facebook 2 months ago calling for attendees at the conference. John, who's now deceased, said from the patio of his house, where they pay $400 a month, high above the bay of Acapulco, quote, "We want freedom of ideas," unquote. And that's all they quote. From waves laughed gently far below and roosters crowed as he spoke. Lily did not respond to request for comment via social media on Saturday. Rumor has it she's on the run. Henza declined to comment. That's the guy who was shot but survived. A U.S. Department of State official said the Bureau of Consular Affairs was aware of an investigation into the death of a U.S. citizen in Acapulco, but that it couldn't provide additional information due to privacy considerations. So John Galton could be a pseudonym, a nod to John Galt, says the AP, the fictional character who defies convention in Ayn Rand's individualistic tome Atlas Shrugged.
Could be a pseudonym. It might not be his real name.
I wouldn't say a pseudonym because a lot of us will just adopt a new name and use that name and sometimes legally change it. So that's not a pseudonym. A pseudonym is when you still use your original name.
But you're using the pseudonym to cover the original name. It's possible he was named that, though. I mean, he's in his 20s, right? So he could be the son of a libertarian who, was into Ayn Rand.
Yeah, that's true. Bob won't let me name our kid Rothbard.
But his last name is still unlikely to be Galton.
Galton?
Yeah. It's possible.
I think you're right. It's unlikely that his name would happen to have been Galton. It's also unlikely that his father changed his name to Galton prior to having the child, then deciding to name him John. So I would say it's probably a chosen name. Whether he's legally changed it or not, that's another question. In a separate video posted to a YouTube channel called Press for Truth, John and Lily describe how in early 2016 they fled drug charges in the U.S. John said they each faced up to 25 years in prison for manufacture of a controlled substance, specifically condensing marijuana into powerful extracts that Lily used for chronic pain. So that's an interesting detail, that they were essentially expatriates not by choice. They left the United States because they were being prosecuted, and they wanted to avoid that.
They pulled a John McAfee.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. I have a lot of respect for people. There's nothing necessarily valuable about facing down 25 years in prison over boiling some cannabis plants in whatever solution you have to put it into to extract the THC and then put it into in a concentrated form. I mean, I think those people are brave to take on those risks, and I don't think that it necessarily follows that you have to fight it in court. Like I
agree.
I'm glad that Rich Paul did when he was facing 100 years in prison, and he went and faced it down. Like, it's a brave thing to do, but it may not always be the smartest thing to do. And in Rich's case, he only got sentenced to a year.
Obviously, you shouldn't aggress against drug dealers or users because you shouldn't aggress against anybody, but that makes this drug-related, not anarchy-related.
You mean the shooting?
All of it?
Well, maybe. Like, we're still not sure. There is just the chance that they fell in with some lunatic, and then who knows what dealings they had with this nut job, whether he be a so-called self-professed anarchist or just some expat who also happens to be floating around their community. Because one thing's for sure, when it comes to migratory movements of libertarians, we know a lot about it because we all migrated here to New Hampshire as part of a libertarian, anarchist, voluntarist migration, whatever word you want to put on it. More people have moved to New Hampshire over time because they want to be around freedom-minded people. Well, the fact is, every now and then some lunatics come to town, and they will do things that are dangerous and stupid, and they may themselves be undercover agents. They might be trying to set people up with putting forth ideas of violence into people's heads and seeing if anybody bites on it, as informants for the federal government or actual undercover feds. So there's been all kinds of people that have shown up here who masquerade as an anarchist, but may in point of fact actually be here to try to put handcuffs on a group of anarchists, to try to encourage them to do things that might get them some criminal charges. So who knows who it is that they were dealing with down there and what their intentions were and how crazy they were. But there's more coming up here about this.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Free Talk Live.
This is Free Talk Live, and you can bring up anything that you want. Our number here is 855-450. Free like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We do have the Discord on-air call-in line rooms as well over at discord.lrn.fm. Just hop into one of those, and we'll get you on the air. You'll sound almost like you are sitting here in the studio with us tonight. It's Ian,
Melanie,
and Aria,
talking about an anarchist, supposed self-professed anarchist, John Galton, who has been shot and killed in the city of Acapulco, Mexico, which is where our regular co-host Mark Edge is with his family right now, getting ready for the or I guess relaxing. They're not doing much getting ready at the moment, but for the upcoming Anarchapulco event that will be happening the 14th through the 17th of this month, by the way, and Free Talk Live will be broadcasting from that event. Anarchapulco.com is where you can go. There's a competing event, however, called Anarchaforco, and I don't know if it's really competing because it's not at the same time. It takes place afterwards, but I guess it's still, to some extent, is competing for you to want to stay in Acapulco, right? So if you're going to Anarchapulco and you're staying a few days after, well, then there's this other thing that you can do. And so apparently the people who were shot, one of them to death, were some of the organizers, some of the main organizers of the Anarchaforco event, which, from what I've heard, is still intended to happen. So if you were planning on going to that event, you may still be able to do so. We're getting into some of the details in the story, or at least the allegations in the story, as reported by the Associated Press, saying that in the house is where the shooting went down, a house they rented for $400 a month, and you can get some pretty sweet stuff up in Acapulco for like $1,000 a month. So I imagine a $400 house is still pretty decent per month there. And shot these people. According to the story at the AP, they then posted Facebook updates shortly after the shooting to ask people for help. I guess they don't trust, maybe they don't want to call the police, they don't trust the police, or maybe they also called the police but also wanted to, I don't know. I have not talked to these folks. The claim that I heard from Mark, who is down there right now, and he's obviously in touch, because all these people know each other, right? The anarchist expats there, they all know who all is in Acapulco. And he says that he's heard that the woman is on the run, and I presume that's because the police found drug-related evidence in the residence, and she's still alive, so they can't charge him with the crimes. So if they're going to charge somebody with something, it's probably going to be her and maybe the other guy who ended up going to the hospital. So we don't know of any charges being brought quite yet in this case, but presumably it's not legal to grow marijuana in Mexico, and probably not legal to have it in Mexico. Now, how illegal is it? I suspect it's probably not as illegal there as it is here to do those things.
Right.
But regardless, it's probably not legal. Back to more of the story. So they talked about in a YouTube video, this was not during the shooting or after the shooting, this was in advance, long in advance, on Press for Truth. This is the AP researching this couple, right? So they found a video where they described how they fled the United States because of potential drug charges. They were facing 25 years in prison for manufacture of basically the cannabis tinctures, the cannabis like wax, cannabis oil concentrates, I guess. And so they hightailed it down to Mexico over their marijuana charges. However, no U.S. federal court records for drug charges were found under the name John Galton. So the AP doesn't know what his legal name is at this point. But it's probably
That's impressive.
It's probably it's impressive that they don't know his legal name, or impressive that he's made it so they don't know.
Impressive that he's made it they don't know.
Well, it sounds like they haven't really been successful at talking to anyone besides the police in this case. So
I'm not terribly surprised.
Yeah. In a second video a year later, so this would have been 2017, somewhere in that range, by Press for Truth, the couple detailed how they were getting by financially through selling glass drug pipes that Lily blew into shape. When asked about the high crime rates in Acapulco, the blue-eyed anarchist with scruffy facial hair said, quote, "I'd say it's safer than any big city I've lived in the United States, like way safer than Chicago or something like that." He said Guerrero State, home to Acapulco, has a murder rate of 64.2 per 100,000 residents, more than 2 times that of Chicago. Acapulco has become a hotbed for violence between drug gangs. John said in the video, quote, "There's pockets of freedom all over the world. There's so much that's more free about where we live here." So have either of you been down to Mexico?
No.
I have not.
I have spent a couple of weeks basically now in Mexico as of the last 2 years, going to Acapulco and going to the Anarchapulco event. So by no means am I an expert on Mexico. And I would not disagree that there are some things that are freer about Mexico. And I think that you can probably say that of a lot of places in the world, that you can find areas that are less free in some ways, but more free in other ways compared to, say, the United States. So I don't doubt that that's true. In the same way that if you go to, Colorado or Washington State or one of the states in the United States where cannabis is legal, for the most part, to use recreationally, you're more free in that one area. However, you are less free in Colorado as far as gun rights are concerned. That's also the truth in Mexico, where it's illegal to have a gun as an individual in Mexico. Now,
is it?
Yeah, in most Latin American countries, it is illegal to bear arms. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that sucks. I don't know how any anarchist could live in a place like that and go, "Oh yeah, I'm freer here."
Well, the argument is they do it anyway, right? So the argument is that they will acknowledge that it is illegal, but then they will say, "But everybody does it."
Okay, fair enough.
They'll tell you that everybody's armed in Mexico who wants to be armed, regardless of the illegal factors. But of course, we all know that when certain things are illegal like this, if the state wants to target you, they certainly can. It gives them yet another aspect that they can come after you for. So, I mean, to say that is Acapulco more free overall than many parts of the United States? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, how do you feel when you are driving down the street and you're following behind or have behind you a truck with armed men sitting in the back of it? I mean, it's technically not any different than, being followed by a police cruiser with 1 or 2 armed men in it.
Except the police cruiser is more likely to, harass you and pirate you.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how much more or less likely that is to happen in Mexico.
Well, the police get paid to do it. So
these armed men are the police, just to be clear. Oh. The armed men.
I said you were referring to some drug cartel or something.
No. I'm glad I got to get to that point. No, these are federales. These are people, and they're all over the place. So you actually will see, at least in Acapulco, you will see the armed men in the backs of trucks, like with mounted guns, that kind of thing, like armed men in a back of a truck kind of thing. You see that very frequently. Compared to what you would see here in the U.S., you'd see a police cruiser with 1 or 2 cops in it. You're going to see armed men in the back of trucks more or as often in Acapulco, and I think those guys exist across the entire country of Mexico.
Right.
So, I mean, how does that make you feel?
Uncomfortable.
Right. But is it more uncomfortable than the man in the cruiser who can also do whatever it is that he wants to? I mean, it's just the difference is really like more in the aesthetic of it than anything else.
Never having been pulled over by a truck full of armed people and only having been pulled over by police officers here in the United States, I would hazard the guess that it's significantly more stressful to get pulled over in Mexico by these people you're describing.
Especially if you can't speak the language.
Well, that too.
Right?
But I mean, here in the United States, and I don't know the status of things in Mexico, but we do have more police accountability than many parts of the world do.
You have the illusion of a police accountability here.
Sure, it's not going to stop them from doing whatever they want to do. But in some cases, you can hold them accountable. And in some cases, they might actually be held accountable. But not always.
Well, and
not
maybe
even usually.
Maybe they would be in Mexico as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's almost impossible to do it here in the United States, so it would be harder for Mexico to be much worse at accountability of police. There's more coming up here. Your calls and thoughts are welcome. Anarchist shot to death in Acapulco. We'll tell you more about the story on the way. This is Free Talk Live. It's Free Talk Live. Dial in, toll free, bring up anything that you want here. Our number is 855-450, free like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. We're trying something new. That's actually not that new of an idea, but we're getting back into something again that we had previously. Video clips, shareable video clips of Free Talk Live. One of the problems with doing a 3-hour-long talk show every single day, and you guys are actually on your 6th hour here of talk radio, basically. Doing a 3-hour-long show is, especially the show like this, where we're not a big budget production. There's no kid over here screening calls inside our studio. We do have a board op over at the network studios in Minnesota, but this is it. The people you hear on the air, this is it as far as our studio here in New Hampshire is concerned. So we don't have a big crew. There's not anybody that we hire to do things. We don't have a whole lot of money to do that. And so, like, taking a 3-hour-long show and spending another hour or two afterwards trying to, like, find the highlights of the show, clip out those highlights, then upload them to a video sharing service like a YouTube or whatever is not something anyone really wants to do. I mean, you just don't want to stick around for another 2 hours after you just got off the air, after you do, the archives, because I usually spend another half hour doing archives for the show, to then do video clip archives that, honestly, at least now, aren't going to get more than a few, dozen views or whatever. Is it worth your time? Well, I mean, in theory, they could blow up, they could go viral, but either way, we found...
Well, you could always make note of timestamps when
you
something
could, but it's hard for me to
interesting
remember
is
to do
said.
it. It's honestly hard for me to like. I'm here running the show. That's the last thing that's on my mind. Very rarely, I will. Every now and then, I will make a note. But when I say every now and then, it's like once every couple months. So it's nowhere near often enough to to have a consistent package of videos coming out. So we brought Eric Freerock back on board. He had started a channel called Liberty Clips. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And he was taking clips of libertarian shows, mostly Free Talk Live, but I think he did some of the other liberty shows that were out there at the time, and took what he thought were the best clips of any given show and would upload the video clips of that, sometimes with like added graphics and stuff too. So like he'd go above and beyond the call of like basic just cutting videos to make them a little bit more visually appealing, because looking at webcams is probably not the most visually appealing of things. And so we talked to Eric and we brought him back on board. In fact, we're spending a little bit of the AMP money to do this. So this is one of the ways we're trying to advertise, market, and promote Free Talk Live, by giving shareable length video clips of like a topic that we discussed or a discussion that we had, so you can share those on whatever social media that you want, because it's more effective to share a 5-minute clip than it is to say, hey, friends and family, there's a really cool segment in this 3-hour-long clip here. It's at an hour and 20 minutes in. Just go ahead and here's the – no, it's just a lot easier to put your favorite clip as its own entity as what you're sharing. So we now have that. And you can go to clips.freetalklive.com. That'll take you to the channel where you can subscribe on YouTube and get those clips. And then you'll see them as they come out. And if you like them, we would hope that you would share them, because that will help spread Free Talk Live, and that helps spread the ideas of freedom. So if you care about liberty, we now have a new tool that will allow you to get some of your, hopefully your favorite moments of the show out into people's hands without having to burden them with an entire 3-hour-long archive that they have to, even though you can jump to the point that you want them to jump to with YouTube, it's still just not as shareable. You know what I mean?
It isn't, but also worth mentioning is that Twitch includes the clip feature and the highlights feature. So if you find something that you do really like, you can quickly clip it or highlight it.
It could be crowdsourced, is what you're saying? You're saying that...
Well, I'm saying if somebody out there sees something that they think, oh, my family and friends should see this, you can clip it yourself, and it only takes... I did my first one, like 12 hours ago-ish.
Now, you said highlights. I know that Twitch has a clip feature, which usually clips, I think, the last 60 seconds or 30 seconds.
Highlight is for anything greater than 30 seconds, but it's the same basic thing.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I would love to see that get decentralized. I mean, it would be wonderful if we could do it without having to have just one person be the person who does it. But our audience is so small at this point, any amount of contributions in that area is more than what we have, basically. So if one person were to clip tonight's show, that would be like the first clip we've had all week, basically, on Twitch. So we're incentivizing the videos to get done by basically we've got Eric. We're paying him to do some of it, but we're also going to drive traffic to his channel. So the idea is hopefully we can build up his YouTube channel to the point where he just wants to do it because it's making him money. Would be nice. That'd be the nice way to do it. How easy that'll be, I'm not sure. But we had to try something new. So check it out over at clips.freetalklive.com. Let's go to the phones. To the phone, we got Paul in California. You're on Free Talk Live. Hello, Paul.
Yeah, hello.
Hey, you're on the air.
I was wondering, aren't you concerned about your own welfare going down there? It sounds like he was an organizer for some of the festivities that you're going to participate in.
You're talking about the shooting of a self-professed anarchist, shooting and killing of an anarchist down in Acapulco. He was an organizer of an event down there called Acapulco, but even if he'd been an organizer of Anarchapulco, which is the event that I'll be going to, it wouldn't change my mind about attending the event at all. I mean, why would I worry about that?
Well, because I thought maybe that somebody in Acapulco, maybe like an ex-military or an ex-police officer, doesn't like the hippies going down there and doing what they can't do in America and trying to live that lifestyle down there, and they went and smoked them.
Well, then why doesn't the military and the cops just live in the country they like?
I mean, it's a speculative...
That's also not what happens.
Yeah, well, we don't know exactly what the motivation of the killer was, right? Like, we have speculation, but what you're saying there, Paul, is definitely speculative, the idea of the motivations behind this killing. It has not been a mass killing of anarchists in Acapulco. I have not heard that anybody's calling off an event or anything like this for fear of some, mass murder of anarchists or something like that. Anything can happen in life, obviously. I mean, there's crazy people out there. But one thing that you really shouldn't do, I don't think, is live in fear of what might happen.
Absolutely.
Because if you let people who want to control you like that...
Then the terrorists win. Tell that to the military and cop guys.
Well, right. So canceling a plan to go to an event because one person was murdered is absolutely letting the terrorists win in that case, if that was the intention of the killers. And again, we have no idea if that was their intent.
I would be extremely surprised to learn that there was a link between the guy running Anarchapulco and his being shot. I would imagine the two things are entirely unrelated. It's like, okay, this guy was shot, but he's also doing this.
Right.
So this is what we're going to talk about because this is, more interesting. It's sort of like the AP digging for things. They find, oh, he's an anarchist. Because that's what leaps out at you.
Sure, it's a noteworthy thing about him. There's no doubt. But Paul, the idea of just being afraid in general, people get freaked out about Acapulco. When folks are saying they're going to go to Acapulco and they tell their family members this is a conversation that happened at the event last year, by the way. And thanks for the call tonight, Paul. I appreciate it. Their family members are like, oh, it's dangerous there. There's murders. You shouldn't go to Acapulco. It's dangerous. And it's like, but it's also a beautiful place, and most of the time you're not going to get murdered when you're in Acapulco.
By definition, most of the time you will not get murdered.
The odds that you're going to get murdered are very, very slim. More coming up. LRN.FM now has a Discord. Discord is a free text and voice chat platform, and we now have our own server with a bunch of channels at discord.lrn.fm. You can join other listeners as they chat about various things during our live shows, or anytime, day or night. Discord software is available cross-platform, so you can have it on whatever device you want and take your chats anywhere. Join our Discord at discord.lrn.fm. That's discord.lrn.fm. It's Free Talk Live. You dial toll-free to join us here. Our number is 855-450-FREE, like freedom. That's 855-450-3733. And I want to say thanks to Brett Perry, who is a gold amplifier, somebody who gives $10 a month to the Free Talk Live AMP program over at amp.freetalklive.com. And we definitely appreciate it. It makes a big difference for us. It's nice to know that people support the things that we do here on Free Talk Live, talking about the ideas of freedom and other things every single night. With you in the studio, it's Ian,
Melanie,
and Aria.
Go get signed up over at amp.freetalklive.com. And if you want to be appreciated on the air like we did with Brett, you do need to opt into that when you join the AMP program, and I'll send you instructions on how to do that. But by default, you're an anonymous amplifier by default, so you kind of have to come out of the closet, if you will, in that case, because not everybody wants to be public about their support for this particular show, and that's understandable. In fact, if you want to be super anonymous, you can use Bitcoin to donate to the AMP program, and then we don't really need to know what your address or anything, because when you do a credit card process, you got to get identifying information to make sure it's not fraudulent and all that. With Bitcoin, it doesn't matter because there's no chargebacks, so we don't have to collect any of that information about you. You could sign up with a fake email address and then just do Bitcoin, and you can amp the show, and we don't even need to know anything about you, which is pretty cool. So check it out over at amp.freetalklive.com. To the phones, we continue with David in San Francisco, listening online. Hello, David.
Yeah, how are you? Hey. I was interested. You were talking about. I jotted it down as freebooters. The description of being in, what was it, Colombia you were talking about, or was it...
Acapulco? You talking about the murder in Acapulco of the Anarchist?
Well, the people driving around with truckloads of guys in...
Yeah, that was in Acapulco. It's the federal police in Mexico.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to go to Egypt once, and we were out there for like 10 days, and like every 50 feet down the road was a guy standing there with a submachine gun. But he had no shelter. He had to be like at full attention for 12 hours a day or something in the hot sun. And so they apparently, this is rumor, they didn't give him a full clip in that submachine gun. They only gave him one bullet because he might blow his brains out. He might blow his master sergeant's brains out. You didn't know what he was going to do after sitting in the sun for 12 hours and no place to sit down or shelter.
Now, where was this again?
That's a pretty good argument for not giving people guns and telling them to go stand in the sun for 12 hours.
Oh, yeah.
What country was this?
That was Egypt.
Egypt, okay.
And we were everywhere from the Aswan Dam all throughout Cairo. Went to all the temples. I went there with a 10-day tour. But this whole idea that they had, they drafted these guys to do it. And if I understand right, the minimum wage in Egypt at the time was $22 a month, but the military service, which was required, was $11 a month. So you were losing half pay to stand in the sun and not blow your
That'll
brain.
drive anybody mad.
Yeah. So truckloads full of guns is, there's a discussion. I consider myself an anarchist, but there's a responsibility.
Sorry, for long-time listeners know why that's funny, but
I don't know
short-term listeners don't know. This guy is definitely a leftist who has called in many occasions to support the government. But if you've changed into an anarchist, I'm really glad to hear that, David. How would you define anarchy or being an anarchist?
You've got to realize that your definition of conservative and liberal is different.
I don't have a definition of those words.
Well, I come from a family of my grandmother on my mother's side. My great-grandfather signed the Declaration of Independence, John Hart of New Jersey. So when I look at the issues that brought America together, united you stand, divided you fall, equal justice under the law, taxation with representation.
America is a country, though, so
those aren't anarchist ideas.
You're an anarchist.
Well, they can be. I mean,
no. Wait. There's a definition for anarchist. What is your definition of anarchist?
Well, an anarchist can be united you stand, divided you fall. There's nothing.
That has nothing.
No, that's a slogan.
You can believe in a slogan as an anarchist. There's no doubt about it, but that doesn't define what an anarchist is.
And equal justice under the law.
Definitely not an anarchist.
An anarchist can get along with that.
What law?
They can't, because there can be no law.
Right. What law? Well, it could be natural law, but what law are you talking about?
Well, that's exactly the point. I consider myself more like an Indian. Somebody who's on God's green earth. That doesn't have to obey some stupid king's dictates. It's and I can live in. If you read Thomas Paine, the guy that basically created the American Revolution with his book by
because
Common Sense.
I studied Thomas Paine in college. He's actually one of my favorite writers. No, he did not basically create the American Revolution. He was a minor figure, and he was well respected among some of his peers, but he was ultimately used and discarded by those same people because they sought power, and he did not approve. The government that they created based on his writings was absolutely a Leviathan power-grabbing government.
I could talk about him all day, but if you look at the opening paragraphs of Common Sense, you're describing a period of time of, 15, 20 years with him. I'm talking about the very first days of the American Revolution, where he describes that a society is when people are in common agreement, and a government is when you create a function. You want to keep the lock and dam working, and so the government is created to keep a guy paid to take care of the lock and dam.
Well, Thomas Paine was certainly not an anarchist anyway.
That's usually the excuse for a government, at least up front.
But he expanded this considerably more so in his later writing, The Rights of Man, where he pointed out the fallacies of government and government control. And again, he wasn't even an anarchist. He was a classical liberal.
Well, his description of a society can include an anarchist, but it's when there's common agreement. You don't want to be crapping in the canal because that stenches it up for everybody. It's like
why is it always poop?
And if someone owned the canal, they could just prohibit that.
It is always poop. Like I've argued with
nobody
many,
likes poop with the exception of very few people.
They didn't
and
have
they always
toilet.
and the response of you guys is always, what if somebody poops in your water? What is this obsession?
Yeah, that's where government comes in.
It was Jackie's go-to response
calling
as
for
well.
government. How can you be an anarchist and call for any kind of government? Any kind of
What happens when a guy upstream poisons the river?
Dude, it's like you're reading a script from things like Jackie say. Come on.
No, it's real. It's real. It happens. It happened in the Erie Canal. It happened in every major river. You start reading about.
What happens when the government poisons the river upstream?
It's usually that the government gives permission to a company to poison.
Yeah, that happens too.
The EPA did that like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, that happens. It all happens. That all happens.
And so that's corruption in our property. The government is supposed to work toward the best interest of all.
A lot of things are supposed to do a lot of things, but what
but
they actually accomplish is the problem.
I don't give up on the concept of equal justice under the law, taxation with representation, and
how can somebody represent you?
To some degrees they do, some degrees they don't.
Okay, how?
I live in the land of Pelosi, where I should be honored to have her fuck the...
LRN.FM
3733. Yeah, he's usually a pretty good caller, but again, got a little bit excited there and said something you're not supposed to say on the radio. Sorry about that. So anyway, 855-450 free. Not an anarchist, though.
Yeah, if you support a government, you are not an anarchist. I don't know. Most people get that.
Now, Mark would argue that you could have, in theory, a government that is not coercive. But, of course, we've never seen anything like that. I don't know if it would be fair to call that.
Mark just redefines the word government.
Yeah,
for
I don't know if it would be
reasons.
fair to call that a government, honestly.
Well, I mean, in theory, communism works. You know?
If everybody would just be nice and work for free.
If you just get rid of that whole human nature thing, then in theory it works, right?
It's a good system, just not applied to humans.
More coming up here in moments. Our number 855-450, free like freedom. This is Free Talk Live. It's Free Talk Live. Moments remain. There's enough time for you. If you want to get in now, we might be able to get you on. Our toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. Tonight, it's Ian,
Melanie,
and Aria.
And don't forget, you can join us online. Just go to freetalklive.com and enjoy the features there. If you would like, you can follow us on Twitch. And on Twitch is where we have our highest quality video streaming. We still have a YouTube channel, but it only gets the 360p quality, while our YouTube stream gets 720 beautiful, crisp lines of resolution that you can watch the show with or just listen. You can also use Twitch as a listening app, although, of course, you can also tune into our live streams with any MP3-based app, but Twitch does have an audio-only option, so it's a nice way to listen to the show. Plus, they've got their own chat room there in Twitch, which isn't quite as busy as the Discord chat server, but nonetheless, it is there. So head on over to twitch.lrn.fm. You can also follow us that way. In fact, I got a comment from a listener the other day saying thanks for being on Twitch, because normally they were a podcast listener, but they like the idea of listening live, so they don't ever remember that we're live, and so having the notification come in on their phone, because there's a Twitch app that you can get. So if you follow the channel on Twitch, then you'll get notifications. I think they might be turned on your account by default. If not, you may have to enable them in your settings. But either way, you can either get an email notice or you can get a actual like little notification thing on your notification bar on your smart device. And then that reminds you, oh, yeah, that show I like is on the air. And it'll also remind you about Aria's show, which is Call to Freedom, that you can listen to or watch. It's also on the same Twitch channel. So if you subscribe to the LRN.FM Twitch channel, you'll be able to see both Call to Freedom and Free Talk Live, as well as Vincent's show on Saturday evenings, which is Questioning Authority, and the occasional Jazzy Cam stream, which is the very cute dog that hangs out in the studio here. Sometimes she has her own 100% Jazzy Cam time, where you'll just be able to listen to whatever's on LRN and watch a cute dog if you want. And then there's every now and then, not very often, I'll do a video game stream as well. So that happens. Plus, when we're not on that stream, every now and then you'll see Aria doing her own game streams from her own channel, because they have the ability on Twitch to do this thing called auto-hosting, where I have a list of Free Talk Live and LRN listeners who also are Twitch streamers, like you, Aria. Yeah. So you don't have to be a host to be on that list, even though you are. If you're just a listener, if you're a fan of what we do here, I'll put you on the auto-host list. And then whenever we're not broadcasting, and maybe you are, or one of those other people like you, Aria, you're broadcasting. So like last night at 2 a.m. Eastern time, apparently, I wasn't able to stay up for it live, but you went live on your stream, and I believe you were carried on the LRN stream, because I saw
I was.
It shows me when the chat room shows me when you stop your stream. It doesn't show when we start hosting you automatically, but it shows when we stop. So I get to see after the fact who was.
Well, my auto hosting has been weird for about the last 2 weeks or so. I don't think it was auto hosting LRN at all, even though it was set to.
Huh.
It does seem to have been fixed today.
Okay, good.
After I changed all of these settings and then put them back in.
But you were playing, I don't even know if I want to say the name of the game, just because it's supposed to be really awful, and I'm sure it's bad. You said it was terrible. But it's the game in which Christopher Cantwell lent his visage and his voice, apparently, I think, to this game.
I never heard his voice, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, right, because you said that you couldn't actually play with the Cantwell character when you start the game, that you have to unlock it, which means you have to play this terrible game for way longer than you would otherwise want to, just to be able to get to the one character who made you interested in playing the game. Because would you have played the game if Cantwell were not in the game?
No.
Right. It wouldn't have even been an option for you.
And the game itself is only available on his website.
Really? He's the exclusive distributor of that game?
Yes, when you launch the game, it flashes up a warning saying, hey, if you got this anywhere else, you've been scammed.
Interesting, because, who knows, whether you're going to get malware or anything like that.
Right.
I thought somebody else made it. I didn't know he made it.
He didn't
make program it.
Okay.
He apparently is the official release point, though, for the game. And he
almost
stars
20,000 downloads.
Is that an impressive number?
I would say so.
Okay. All right. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they were all individuals downloading it, but that's another story.
That's true.
So let's continue here. We've got Emerson on the line in Michigan. You're on Free Talk Live. Hello, Emerson.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yes.
Before I forget about this, because I forgot to mention it last time, I figured I'd let you guys know about the fact that I wouldn't be surprised if all your emails are going out and catching people's spam filters on Gmail, because I signed up for your email list years ago, and it's been in my spam until just the day that I called in the first time,
darn
4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah, it's too bad. Did you mark it as not spam?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, I guess that's all we can do, because we pay a service to do that. There's supposed to be services that will supposedly be better at getting you through spam filters, but nothing's perfect, I guess.
Yep. No.
Thanks for the heads up, though. There's nothing I can do about it.
No problem. If you guys don't mind, I would like to try to import some constitutional wisdom to your audience.
Okay, you can try.
All right. I guess this first one would come across to the topic you were talking about earlier, which was something to do with firearms. Mm-hmm. First, I'd like to say a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
I love the inflections. So you've just read the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Okay, what about it?
Yes. This is something that there is a relationship to the Ninth Amendment and 10th Amendment, which I don't think a lot of people actually understand or know about, which I would like to try and describe and explain, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
All right. So Amendment number 9, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Meaning the enumeration counts for the list of rights given to you prior up to this point in the Constitution shall not be construed to deny or disparage. Disparage meaning like making somebody think that maybe they don't have it, or seeking them away from believing that this is their right.
Okay.
For those retained by the people. And Amendment 10 further backs this up, speaking, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Meaning, everything that's listed in the Constitution up to the 10th Amendment is not to be effed with. Those are down. That's the only law of the land. Every right that you have up to the 10th Amendment is your right. There is not supposed to be any law or any statute or anything which goes to construe or disparage.
Well, I don't know if that's how everybody interprets the 10th Amendment. I think a lot of people interpret the 10th Amendment as being, essentially a restriction on the federal government, but essentially passing the buck down to the states to say, okay, well, there could be further restrictions at the state level.
It is. However, it is past the 9th Amendment, and the 9th Amendment puts it on the people's level.
I don't think that the amendments are ordered in any sort of ranking.
They are because if you go through time, you could find that as we had our initial Constitution on obviously the First Amendment, freedom of speech, Second Amendment, right to bear arms.
I have never had a Constitution. I would just like to point out.
Besides that, was to be able to protect your freedom of speech, and people that try to construe.
Well, then they were idiots.
Second Amendment,
because they should have been ranked with the right to bear arms as the first one.
Military issues with the third one.
Well, yeah, no, that's not how that works. So the later passed amendments, not necessarily overrule. They overrule the earlier amendments to the extent that they conflict. That's how ordering works.
I would go to disagree and say that the earlier amendments overrule at a base point.
Okay, well, every
we just throw out the entire sheet of
judge in
paper.
the country disagrees with that, so it kind of doesn't matter.
Well, either way, Aria,
that's the point. It doesn't. But I mean,
so Aria, you were laughing as he read
also
those.
A portion of the country that does agree with it.
Can you explain why that was funny?
Well, the inflection was one part.
Okay,
but I mean, the main part is just the Constitution. It's ridiculous. It's a total waste of time. It didn't work.
Also, I didn't sign it, so don't include me in your Constitution.
I didn't sign it.
In fact, everyone who did sign it, they're all dead.
Yeah, and we're not governed by the dead.
We're governed by people with guns and cars and, brick buildings, bars behind which they can throw you.
Acting on the interests of the dead, by and large.
Emerson, I wish we had more time to talk about this. Unfortunately, it's the very end of the show, so I would recommend calling another night earlier, perhaps, because it seems like whenever people call into the show on a weeknights, it's usually the final hour. So the closer you call toward the end of the show, the more difficult it is to have any kind of meaningful conversation about a deep topic like this. Because, the Constitution isn't a bad starting point for people to kind of learn about things, but it obviously didn't work. Right, because it did not hold the government in check in any way, shape, or form. We'll see you tomorrow night online. In the meantime, you can join us at freetalklive.com. Are you a cryptocurrency advocate? The Crypto Tip is the ideal outreach tool to help new people discover cryptocurrency. It's a printable business card-sized tip that you can give to service providers, preferably in addition to a good cash tip. When the server scans the QR code, it'll bring up an explanation of cryptocurrency, how to install a wallet, and allow them to claim the tip. If they don't claim the crypto, you get your tip refunded to you after a time period you specify. Plus, if they do claim the tip, you get an email alert. Create as many tips as you want at cryptotip.org. That's cryptotip.org.